A lot of people that are struggling to see progress, often something as simple as, just reducing the picking and snacking, just getting rid of that, or even improving it, can have such a big impact on their progress.
So because of a lot of people have this expectation that, okay, if I have to get in shape, I have to train 6 hours a week, spend 2 hours in the kitchen, and then I have to do high rocks and half marathon on top of that.
And if you're hitting these calorie targets 7 days across the week, it's nearly 3,500 calories of a deficit, and that's about 1 pound of fat loss. So
for a lot of people, they think they're on time, but the actual reality is they don't have energy.
Eating healthy food is just as much effort as eating unhealthy food.
It's actually how you respond in the more difficult times when things aren't going to plan. That is the real important thing for long-term success. Nobody's going to shame or guilt themselves into shape for 10 years.
This is the Future Fitness Lifestyle, the podcast for high achievers who want to take control of their long-term physical and mental well-being. I'm Matt Cooney, and every week we break down the habits, mindset and strategies to build lasting health, energy and strength without sacrificing your career, family or lifestyle. No quick fixes, no fads, just real sustainable results. Because the choices you make today determine the future you step into. Ready to level up? Let's dive in.
And today there's only 3 of us. We're a couple of, I was going to say men down. 1 man, 1 woman down. Sharon and Tommy both are sick this week. So it's just me with the O'Keefes again. And Tommy, if you're listening back to this, and Sharon, hope you're feeling better. Tommy literally just smashed a marathon a couple of days ago. So massive congrats to him on that. And smashed his time as well. Alongside Barry Corkin, we have to say well done to Barry as well. But that's not what we're going to talk about today. We're going to go talk about dieting again and fat loss. And what I want to kind of dig into is a couple of the most common barriers that I see that come up that essentially stop people from being successful with their fat loss. Firstly, Eva Roisin, any update on how your own diets are going?
Pretty good. The Skills is my friend this week, so I'm happy.
My diet is going good, as in like everything, I'm kind of ticking the boxes, but I'm not really seeing much progress this week. But obviously, I think I'll see it in the next week or two. I know sometimes I'll see it like a stall for a couple of weeks, but I know that keep going. Especially this week, there's a lot of I've just got a lot of soreness and low energy and stuff. So I'd say that's definitely impacting it. But yeah, going good so far and still enjoying it. No real negatives yet.
Yeah. I've noticed that how easy it is to overconsume calories the last couple of weeks. I feel like it was when I started dieting, it's, you get that more awareness. You're really tracking what you're consuming. And I kind of even when I started, I'm on 2,400 or 2,600 calories in between there. And I'm still quite a lot of food. But then after a few days, I'm I could definitely see how I could eat a lot more than this very easily. And even when we were traveling on the plane, it was something that I was thinking is just how easy it is to overconsume. So we tracked our food on the plane. So we did, 8-hour journey from Dubai to Spain. We got 2 meals. And if you ever had plane food, right, it's quite small, but there's a lot of different things. They give you these little crackers and bits and bobs. So there's a lot of little things, but it's not actually very filling. And then, an 8-hour flight, we got 2 meals. The total calories on them was around 1,850 for the 2. And that wasn't including any liquid calories. We didn't drink or anything like that. And I was just came off the flight and I was starving. And I was I just consumed about 75% of my calories. And I was just thinking for a lot of people who often will say they don't eat much, or they're oh yeah, I'm a bit of a snacker or a picker, how easily that can add up. Because even with the plain food, there's just cheese and crackers and bits, these little things. Even when I was adding up, I was geez, they have 50 calories, 100 calories, 50, and they all just kept adding up. And then I was no way am I consuming. I don't feel like I've ate 1,800 calories. I feel like I've ate 800. So I thought that was just interesting. And on a side note, Eve loves plain food, which is
so random. The only person. Do you fly first class?
Yeah, I love plain foods. No, on normal economy, but I just all the little things and get a little fruit plate, get a little mini muffin, get a little dinner. And it's just, I don't know, I just like it. I like having loads of different little things.
Yeah, I don't know anyone else that has said they're really plain food and look forward
to seeing what it is.
But I think what you were saying there,
yeah, so that
I'm saying it.
what you were saying there, Matt, about like picking and snacking, I think that's probably one of the biggest barriers for fat loss. Speaking of like the topic, like a lot of people will struggle with that, and I know especially a lot of my clients will picking and snacking tends to be the biggest thing that holds people back. And like you were saying there, a lot of people, they might pick or snack at the odd little thing here and there, but think, oh sure, it's nothing, or there's no point tracking that, it's only 50 calories, it's only 100 calories. Like, if you think about, if you really just actually 100% for the week, all those little tastes, bites, licks, any little kind of small thing that you had, I guarantee you, if you added it up, it would add in a huge amount. And, a lot of people that are struggling to see progress, often something as simple as, just reducing the picking and snacking, just getting rid of that, or even improving it, can have such a big impact on their progress.
Yeah, see, that's because I'm in my own place now. I have full control of the food that's in the house. So that's why I only have what's on my plan. Whereas last year or the year before when I was living at home, it's worse because especially when you're living in a house where nobody else is dieting and an Irish household that's like full of snacks in every presses, it's a lot harder to be like strict. Whereas here I don't have the snacks. I have the food that I'm eating this week and that's what I'm getting. So it just takes that makes it a little bit easier.
yeah, and I think snacking and picking is really habitual as well. So you don't really know. Some people are actually unaware that they're doing it. Like I remember having a conversation, like a back and forward with a client before, and they were basically eating their leftovers of their kids' food. And then I was like, can you like add up or just like really be aware of how much actually you're consuming? And then she came back like a few days later. It's like, actually, it's about 300 to 500 calories extra a day. And just of either picking at their food while they're cooking it and then finishing it, And it's like the kicker with that as well, picking and snacking, is you don't really get the fullness of it. So you consume more food, but you don't get full. So then you're hungry again down the line, versus having those bigger meals that are going to be more satiating. And
yeah, so basically as well, or sorry, keep going. I thought you were finished.
Go ahead, Dave. Cut me off. You're all right.
No, it's good.
So that's what I was just going to say. I finished with mind. Essentially, picking and snacking for a lot of people is mindless. And like when we look at mindless eating, very easy to overconsume. Even doesn't really digest as well, and it doesn't really fill you. So versus the opposite is mindful eating, which we talk about a lot. Which is actually taking your time, being present, chewing your food. That can make a lot of difference, and especially if you, because people will say the words I'm a snacker, I'm a picker, or whatever it is, and it's like, if you, like Eve, you mentioned, if you actually add that all up over a period of a week, it can really add up, and that's without technically going off track or doing anything else, and it going off your diet at all. And I think Eve, you actually, I was going to get into this later, but we were talking last week about, you were kind of given, it's a really good analogy of like the percentages across a week, how you could say undo your whole deficit. Will you go over that for me?
Yeah, so basically what I was kind of saying was, let's just say you're like a normal person trying to lose weight, and you're in a 500 calorie per day deficit. So like for a woman, we'll say like average woman, her maintenance is probably around 2,000, 2,200. If you put her into a 500 calorie deficit per day, so, she's on 1,700 calories, and that's her calories that, she's going to lose weight on. And if you're hitting these calorie targets 7 days across the week, it's nearly 3,500 calories of a deficit. And that's about 1 pound of fat loss. So for someone who's sticking to their diet on these calories, within a week, they should lose 1 pound every week. And I was just kind of saying that, okay, so basically, let's just imagine you're on track for the whole week. Then the weekend comes around, you go out Saturday night, and you're not even kind of going crazy. You're maybe just having like, okay, I'm going to just have a starter and a main. I'm skipping dessert because I'm watching what I'm eating, and I'm just going to have 2 glasses of wine. So with those options, and even if you're being pretty savvy with your choices, you can still easily hit probably over 2,000 calories. And if you're in a deficit of 3,500 calories per week, that 2,000 is literally going to take over half the deficit you've built. And then on top of that, like if you're doing a tiny bit of picking and snacking every day, you've pretty much just wiped out the whole deficit from the week. So I think I was just kind of explaining that to a lot of clients in the last couple of weeks that, you know, if you do have things on at the weekend, or if you are going out for like a meal out or something, you can definitely still work these in, but you do need to be a little bit more aware of calorie targets on average, kind of across the week, across the month. So say, for example, you might be like, okay, I'm going out for dinner Saturday night. You keep your whole diet the same for the whole week. Saturday, then you just maybe keep a couple of calories aside. So maybe, you know, I'm going to keep 500-600 calories aside for a dinner. And let's say you go out, you have a main course, you have one glass of wine, and you know, let's say it ends up being maybe 1,000 calories. At least that way, then, you know, you've only gone about 500 calories over on the week. So you're still in a pretty big deficit. You still had a meal out, you've still been able to enjoy it, but just by that little bit more of choices and control, it's kind of made a huge difference.
It's just being strategic with it.
Yeah,
I think
it's a lot of quick.
and that's where, yeah. But it's good to see. I feel like the percentages sometimes can be quite good to understand. And, you know, this is where the education and the skill part of it, like food, having knowledge around calories, macros, even eating out, all this, it's a skill that is learned over time because there's a lot of components to it. And like I said about habits, some people habitually just will consume more. They're not really aware of what they're doing, you know? So that's why even things like tracking your calories, like you don't have to do it for the rest of your life, but everybody at some point should do it for a period of time because it's a really great skill because it learned. Even somebody texted me yesterday that I was like, right, let's just track for this next few days. And they just text me this morning. They're like, I can already see where I'm over consuming within like 24 hours. And like before that, they were kind of like, why aren't I losing weight, you know? And then as soon as you actually really start to monitor it, you realize where the issues are, or what may be holding you back. That's where, like you said, like it's not a prison sentence for the rest of your life. You have to track every single bit of food, but for a period of time, it definitely is worth it. And that's kind of touching on one of the main barriers that I wanted to, because weekends was one of them. But I want to go through kind of 3 key points today when it comes to fat loss and kind of the main barriers I see. Number 1 is just a lack of time. Number 2 is the weekends and socializing. And number 3 is inconsistency, or essentially taking that all or nothing approach, or even not being able to get back on track. So would they be kind of 3 common ones that you guys would see?
Yeah, I think the lack of time is a big one, but I think with time, that we'll always say that, like, we don't have time. I don't have time for this. I don't have time for that. And if you always say that, you'll never find the time. So you have to make the time. A lot of the time we find these excuses, and the excuses are valid for why we can't do X, Y, and Z. But underlying those excuses is usually a feeling of low self-worth, like I'm not worth this time. And so you find, because obviously we've been conditioned to work, like career is more important, or doing stuff for other people is more important. And so finding the time for ourselves, it's easy to find these excuses. But something I was saying, what did I hear the other day? On time. Oh, I'm gone blank. It'll come to me.
Yeah, I did hear something that I find with time is people, because everyone's busy, right? It's like they have a lot going on, work, career, everything. A lot of times they feel like they can't commit to their health, their nutrition, a fat loss diet, whatever it is. And I think this kind of comes down, there's 3 main elements to it that I see. First one is like just the prioritization of your time. And this is where I'm not going to give you the whole, everyone has the same 24-hour spiel, because that's a pile of crap. But what I think they really mean in that is that there's only 24 hours in a day, as in there's not 25. You know, there's always 24. So you can't create more time. It's just how you use the time that you actually have available. And a really easy example of that is what I call like an hour swap. If you can swap 1 hour in the evening for 1 hour in the morning, so take an hour off the evening, get up an hour earlier. If you take that evening and go, you watch Netflix for an hour less, 1 hour less crap TV, you get up 1 hour earlier, you exercise, you get some form of self-care done and get a little more in routine. Still had the same time. You just took 1 hour from the evening, put it to the morning. Like, you do that for a year and you will progress exponentially. And it's the same. You haven't done, I still haven't been able to create 25 hours in a day yet. So that's where I think it's just the prioritization of time. And then the second part is a lot of people's expectations of how much time it takes is off. So because of a lot of people have this expectation that, okay, if I have to get in shape, I have to train 6 hours a week, spend 2 hours in the kitchen, and then I have to do a high rocks and a half marathon on top of that. Bit of an over exaggeration, but they feel like they have to commit so much time. But the reality is you don't. It's just because we all love extremes, right? It's like everything has to be extreme. But we have lots of clients who are simply working out 2 to 3 times a week for 30 to 45 minutes, eating a healthy diet, and prioritizing, trying to get out, get some movement in, being active, being healthy. And they're making great progress. So the problem for a lot of people who feel like they can't commit is like that expectation. They don't even start because they're like too busy, can't do it. Like, there's too much going on. How am I going to fit 10 hours extra into my week? Whereas it's really just about fitting it into your lifestyle. And I think the last one, number 3, is kind of like priorities and like reframing that, because like you said, Ro, it's like a lot of people would say, I don't have time. What I find is if I was having a conversation with someone, they're like, I have no time. The first thing I'd say, okay, is give me a look at your Google Calendar or your diary. Like, what does your week look like? And more often than not, the answer to that would be, I'm not very organized. So it's again, a skill issue of how do you manage your time? And there's an easy reframe, which is a bit of a weird one, but I always think of this essentially will call out bullshit on all of us. And like, Roisin, you said it, like, all of us have these excuses of not enough time. Let's say you say, all right, I can't eat, meal prep, or exercise. And I say to you, right, I'm going to kidnap your family or your kids. And if you don't exercise 4 days this week for half an hour and meal prep, I'm going to murder your family. Are they going to die? Right? Why? Because you will exercise 4 days a week and you will meal prep, but you didn't have time half an hour ago. Now you have time. So it's not time, it's priorities. Now there's a big value on doing that because somebody's life is on the line. That's an extreme example, but that's a way that all of us, myself included, you can literally call yourself out on that straight away and go, okay, that's the narrative that I'm saying. But the reality is, okay, if I actually prioritize this, obviously I don't want you to have your family's life on the line, but it's just an extreme example. It's like, okay, I can make that time if I prioritize it.
Yeah, and I think a good way of like looking at that as well is like your health is an investment. It's not like a chore or an option. Like, you making sure that you're eating a healthy, well-balanced diet, doing a bit of exercise every week, whether it's 2 home workouts or whatever it is, like, that's essential for your long-term health. And when people can actually reframe that, I think it really helps. And being able to kind of be like, by doing this, by looking after myself, you'll actually make more time because you'll have more energy, you'll feel better. And, life's just going to be a lot better if you're actually looking after yourself and your health.
Yeah. One thing that that I went blank on earlier is, if you think you don't have time, look at your screen time. Because I'm pretty sure that we can all knock an hour off our screen time and prioritize ourselves. And just what Eve was saying there as well, it's like these things, it's going to take a little bit of effort at the start because you're not used to this. You're not used to going to the gym 4 days a week or meal prepping. And so there is that effort and there is that strain at the start, but you're essentially just switching out habits. So eventually this becomes more of a little autopilot and you get into the rhythm. So of course you're going to need to put a little bit of force and it's going to be a bit of effort at the start, but eventually you'll find a flow to it. And like Eve said, you see all the benefits, more energy, just a better look on life kind of thing.
And then, yeah, I definitely think
think
as
you
well,
both-
another thing I was thinking there, like eating healthy food is just as much effort
Yeah.
as eating unhealthy food. And I think maybe a lot of people who are maybe stuck with an unhealthy diet, it's obviously like Roisin was saying, to break the habits or hard to get into a good routine with nutrition. But like when you get to that point, for me now to go and put a pizza in the oven, I could make a healthy, well balanced meal probably quicker than it takes to cook a pizza for 10 minutes. And like once you kind of have your ways that work for you, whether I know last week's podcast, you know, we talked about what works for different people, but like you don't have to be someone that meal preps 4 hours every Sunday for the whole week. I mean, that works for some people, but reality is it doesn't work for everybody. Like for me, for example, I wouldn't be able to do that, spend hours on a Sunday prepping food. Whereas I know Roisin, you do that. Matt, your client Julie, she does that as well. We have a lot of clients that will kind of do that for the week, but for other people, you know, other things work better, like, you know, cooking as you go or having those like quick little ways of saving time in the kitchen and, you know, being able to put together a quick and healthy meal.
I think both of you said it about energy, and that's where I often look at it and go, is it time or energy management that's the issue here? Because for a lot of people, they think they don't have time, but the actual reality is they don't have energy. Because it's like, if I give you a load of time, you have no energy. If I give you time, you probably do nothing with it because you don't have the energy to do anything with that time. So it's actually an energy issue. And it's like, if you had that little bit more energy, you would then make more of your time because you'll want to do things. And that's even like with nutrition, like you were saying, it's a little bit more energy to make your own food than it is to go stand in a queue at a deli. Still pretty much the same time, but a little bit more effort to do it yourself. Not even that much, really. But it's the same thing. It's more about energy. And I think that's, if people have more energy, they will make more of their time because you want to as well. Then you actually, like, you're not dreading it. You know, you're not getting to the end of the day. You're absolutely zapped. You're like, okay, after work, I can grab my bag and just go to the gym, you know? And so that's where, to get that energy though, again, takes that little bit of effort first to change the habits and to make sure you're putting things in place, you know, with your exercise, your nutrition, whatever it may be.
And that energy, you notice that even just focusing on getting in enough water, if you're somebody who doesn't hydrate right, and then all of a sudden you just do a week of getting in water, you're going to feel energy from that alone. So it's these, like you said, Matt, people see this change as like so many things. Oh my God, it's overwhelming. I can't do this. But it's actually these tiny little steps that you can do that you slip into your day that you don't even really notice that can make huge difference.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it becomes pretty much automatic then. And another way I kind of like to look at it, just to kind of help me understand it a bit more, is even for me, just this is kind of random, but starting skincare, I like try to start this big
20-step
complicated 5-step skincare routine, and like I do it for like a night, I'd skip it, and I just was never able to kind of do it. Whereas I started with like cleanser and moisturizer, and you know I built that as a habit, and then over time, you know, add in the serums or whatever. But I kind of see that's what happens for a lot of people when they're trying to maybe overhaul their diet or their lifestyle. They're trying to go from 0 to 100. Whereas if you can just say, okay, what's 1 or 2 tiny little improvements I can make this week? And whatever it is, it might be, okay, I'm going to eat more vegetables this week. I'm going to eat a vegetable with every meal, or I'm going to have 3 pieces of fruit per day, or whatever kind of small little improvement it is, or, you know, I'm going to drink 2 liters of water per day. And like keep track of that for 1 to 2 weeks. And if you are kind of 80% consistent with that habit, then, you know, you can add something else or you can take it up another step. Whereas if you're below that 80% mark, then you probably need to strip it back a little bit more and just maybe make it a bit easier.
Yeah, I totally agree with all of that. I think another thing as well is like people don't, and I think we talked about this on other episodes, is people don't actually realize how good they can feel. And so they don't realize that, like Eve said, making those tiny improvements, after a week or two, you start feeling so much better. There's no possibility that you won't feel better if you make those tiny improvements. And then you get that like energy to be like, oh my God, wow, I can actually feel like this on a daily basis. And then that gives you the momentum to keep going. But yeah, I think that's the thing. A lot of people don't realize where they are at now. They assume that's a normal way to feel, and they don't realize how much better they can feel.
Sometimes it's nearly too small. It's like it's nearly too easy because again, the expectation is it has to be hard, it has to be heavy, it has to be punishment. It's like literally, if you just put a glass of water, it's just drink some water. Then you do this, and then you do the next thing, and it becomes these little small steps. And I think that's where if you remove the expectation, it's kind of like a lot of people would be like, I need to lose 2 stone, which is very daunting. But then if you go like, can you lose 1 pound this week? Is that possible? They'd be like, yeah, of course I can. But then it's like, if you just repeat that for 28 times, you've lost 2 stone, And it's like anybody can lose a pound. But then because you're kind of looking too far ahead, it's like you end up either overthinking it, procrastination, and then you just end up, for a lot of people, not even starting. So this kind of leads into the next one that I want to talk about, which is kind of inconsistency. We'll come back to the weekends and finish on that because I just mentioned it. So yeah, I think a big problem for a lot of people is they feel like they need to be perfect. And then one slip up leads to them completely going off track, or an event happens. Something comes up in their life. And you'll know this for so many times. You'll hear people doing, quote unquote, like falling off the wagon, or they do really well for a couple of weeks. Something in their life happens, and then they can't get back into that routine and essentially can't build up that momentum again. Would you, and like you'll see it, a lot of people have this perpetual cycle of across a year. It's like a couple of weeks, quote unquote, on it, something happens, they're off it for a good few weeks. Then it's like, no, come again now, Monday, I'm on it again. And then this perpetual cycle just repeats itself. And some people honestly will be doing that for 10, 20 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely think, and a good way to kind of put it that I kind of say to a lot of people is, it's not the meal out or the night out that affects your progress. When you like go out for that meal or the night out, and then you're feeling guilty about it, and the next day you kind of are just like, well, what's the point? You don't get back into a routine. You kind of just let it spiral for a couple of days, and then Monday comes around and you're basically like starting over again. Whereas if people can look at it like, okay, look, you have social events, there's going to be nights or meals out where, you just maybe overindulge, or you have a bit more than planned, or, you really enjoy yourself, but you can still keep a few little key things in place around them. Like instead of, going out on a Friday night and taking 3 days to get back to routine, you could do something like, okay, I'm going out tonight. I'm going to make sure that I have a good breakfast today. I'm going to maybe plan a takeaway recipe for tomorrow. I'm going to make sure I get up in the morning, go for a walk, clear the head, drink some water, and get myself set up for next week. And, you still are able to enjoy the night out, but you're just going to feel so much better, and you're going to kind of move away from that, like on or off the wagon kind of cycle that a lot of people get into. Because I definitely see that with a lot of clients where, they might have a night out or something like that, and they just feel really bad after it, and they just let it spiral for a couple of days instead of just being like, okay, I enjoyed it. It was a good night. Time to get back to routine. Okay, so I got cut off there. I don't remember whereabouts I was, but I think I was basically just saying that, a lot of people kind of will go completely off track over the weekend and not kind of put any boundaries in place, or not have a plan and think, what's the point? Sure, I'm going out for drinks or I'm going out for a meal. There's no point in keeping a few habits in place because I'm going to go off track anyway. Whereas if you can kind of approach it with that mindset of, okay, look, I'm going out, I'm going to have a couple of drinks or a meal out, but what can I control around that? Or what kind of boundaries can I put in place? Or do I have like a bounce back strategy in place? So like, how am I going to get back on track after this? Do I have everything ready for tomorrow? Am I going to, what's my plan for tomorrow so that I can get myself back into a good routine? And I think that's a big thing that a lot of people struggle with. And yeah, it's probably one of the biggest barriers for most people.
Yeah. And it just leads to that on or off approach. And it's like, it's that all or nothing mentality that people have. So when they can't be perfect, they're, and it's like, you see people, they're either on a diet or they're off a diet. And this is where we talk about the lifestyle all the time, is because you're always going to have things that come up in life. It's completely normal. So you actually there's only two things you can do. You can either accept it and like learn how to manage that situation, or you let it affect you. And the thing is, all of us want to be able to go on holidays, go to events. Christmas comes every year. There's all these times where a lot of people will essentially go off track, but instead of it being Christmas week, it's like ends up being 3 months. So you actually want to be able to experience these things. You don't want to give them up. And that's where you have to learn how to manage during these times. And even if you look at a normal month for most people, it's never going to be perfect. You're probably going to have a week where you have a deadline in work or really busy work schedule. You're probably going to have a week where kids are sick or there's something on, and then probably going to have a week where maybe you have a social event to manage. And then maybe you have a week where nothing is on. That's probably most a normal life for a lot of people. So there's always going to be, that's 1 week a month where you have essentially nothing on. So you're always going to come up against these things. You just have to learn how to deal with them and manage them so that you don't end up just basically hitting the self-destruct button and then trying to kind of start again. And I always look at it, a lot of people are like, it's very easy to do it when it's going well, but it's actually how you respond in the more difficult times when things aren't going to plan. That is the real important thing for long-term success. Because if you look at people who are successful versus not successful with their fat loss attempts, it's the people who are successful. They have the same situations as the people who aren't successful. It's not like they're living on a different planet where nothing goes on. They just track their macros. They still have these events and that. They just keep going, or they just make sure that one meal doesn't turn into a day, or one day it doesn't turn into a week, which turns into a month. So again, it's very much how you respond to those situations. I think taking it as people like to look at it as I failed, instead of going, okay, that didn't go to plan. What can I learn so that the next time that situation comes up, I can respond and act differently? Because, like I said, those situations are going to come up again. So you need to get better over time at learning how to manage them. And then getting back on track is another key. A lot of people, what tends to happen is when everything is going good, you have momentum. When you lose that momentum, people just try to get back to doing what they were before, say, they went off track. But it's like, you can't, because you don't have the momentum anymore that was taking you. You need to actually build back up that momentum. So that's where focusing on the right things is important, because what a lot of people do is, again, they go off track, they try to restrict themselves, or they try to over exercise. They do basically just do the wrong things to try to quote unquote make up for it, versus actually what you probably want to do is less, because you don't have the momentum anymore. So maybe you actually need to start smaller. And like we were saying, just those couple of things where you're drinking more water, eating better, making, getting off the phone, just getting outside, getting walks in, little things that maybe aren't as sexy. They're more important when it comes to getting back on track, because they build the momentum again. I look at it like a car. It's like you have to go through the gears. You can't just go from first to fifth. You can't. So when you've lost momentum, you can't just start a car in fifth. If you were in fifth, doesn't matter. The car is now not moving. You have to start back at the start and build up the gears again. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. I kind of always say that to clients as well when they come back from a holiday. Really, kind of, you're just laying the foundations again. So, you're not trying to do a million things the day you get back from holidays, because to get yourself back to routine, you have to go back to work. You've a million different things to get yourself back into routine with, instead of trying to hit the ground running and trying to do everything 100%. Just be like, okay, what's the priority here? good quality food. I don't even need to track my calories or, worry about that. But I just probably need to eat some more fruit, more veg, get my meal structure back in place, up my hydration, get a good sleep routine back in place. And then as the week goes on, you start to feel the benefits of the few little habits that you started with. And then you kind of have a bit of momentum so you can, add other things back in.
I think a huge thing here is like your mindset around it. Well, firstly, perfection, there's no such thing as perfect. It doesn't exist. And usually perfectionism is because there's an underlying fear there about not being good enough or whatever it is. But a huge thing in this whole process is, you've kind of mentioned it, is self-compassion and having that compassion for yourself. Like, you see the work you're putting in. If you fall off track, don't beat yourself up. And it's because a lot of us go into this dieting phase or prioritizing your health from a place of punishment, because it's like, oh, I've gotten myself to this unhealthy stage. Now I need to punish myself into a healthy stage. And it's just switching your mindset around it, because if you're punishing yourself, you feel that guilt and all of this. And it's not a punishment to get healthy. It's actually a privilege. You get to go and you get to work out, you get to move your body, you get to make smart choices with your food, and you get to prioritize yourself. And I think when you make that mindset shift, falling off the wagon or making a mistake, you're able to see it as like from a different perspective. And so you're able to jump back on and get the ball rolling again from just a different mindset.
Yeah. That's why emotional control is so important, because if all your actions come from a place of shame, guilt, or frustration, it's going to be very hard to be successful long term, because like that type of emotions can get you moving. It can be a reason to start, but you can't stay there, because nobody's going to shame or guilt themselves into shape for 10 years. It's not going to happen. Maybe, if that's the way you start, as you go through the process, you then start to, we've all probably been like that. When you do start a journey, it's usually from a place of pain or wanting to get away from where you're at. But you can't just constantly try to run away from where you're at. You need to actually run towards it, which then is more feelings of gratefulness, joy, excitement. The things that are they're the things you will want to keep feeling. It's that feeling of. That's why a lot of us do these hard things. It's like, yes, they're hard, but it's that feeling of accomplishment after it. And it's not like we do these hard things and then we feel shame after it or guilt. It's more joy and essentially different. It's a different emotional state. It's a higher emotional state, which actually ends up in better decision making ability, better quality of life, essentially. And yeah, I think it's super important to understand that. And that's where, again, it goes just beyond calories or, being in a calorie deficit, whatever it is. There's a lot more to unpack around it. And I think it's really important to know that. And then the last one that I want to touch on, which we've already kind of went through, is the weekends. So a lot of people, essentially, they're work week dieters. They're good Monday to Friday, quote unquote, and then the weekend comes and then they go way off track. They hit the self-destruct button. And I think with this, we've touched on a lot of the kind of things to do with like the education around nutrition, understanding how to actually approach the weekends. I do feel like there's also a big part for a lot of people is breaking habits. So for most people, like eating a takeaway on a Friday night is a habit. It's just a thing you get into. Having a bottle of wine on a Saturday is just a habit. A lot of these things are habitual, and that's where you need to kind of break. You need a pattern interrupt, which is you need to change the approach. So that's where, like, even changing your environment, changing your schedule, where you are. Because again, if you're sitting at home on a Friday night and usually you go crack open a bottle of wine, have the whole thing, and then eat a bunch of crap alongside it. If you're just sitting down on the couch, it's going to be like, your brain's going to be like, bottle of wine is what usually happens now. Versus if you organize to go, I don't know, for a walk or do something different with a different group of people or whatever it may be, you won't have that same craving essentially for that habit. And I think that's where those pattern interrupts are really beneficial, especially with the weekend, because again, it's nearly like ingrained in us that we go to work Monday to Friday, we go to work, weekend, quote, I nearly deserve this, and then we eat, drink till we feel sick, and then Sunday we feel sorry for ourselves, we're dreading Monday, and then we repeat the cycle, you know. So I think it's taking a different approach is what's needed, and often they're changing your environment, changing your location, the activities you do, and also people. Again, sometimes there's people that you maybe always drink with or only drink with or do the, you know, versus if you change the people that you're around, it rubs off their habits and stuff, you know. So yeah, I think that's a big something that's maybe missed a bit when it comes to the weekends is that habitual cycle.
Yeah, I think it's exactly what you said, is changing it up, doing something a little different. And just like, if you're committing to something like this, focusing on your health and fitness, and that takeaway on a Friday night is not an option, then play around with like, okay, what would I like to do? What are other things I would like to do on this evening? You know, maybe even like cooking a dinner with your partner, and it doesn't have to be this, like, we have a load of recipes, but it doesn't have to be this like plain bland food. You can still cook a fakeaway that essentially will taste exactly like that takeaway, but now you've put some time, you've put some effort, you can turn that into a nice thing to do in the evening, and still have that feeling that you're treating yourself and you're enjoying it. Instead of, I think what, like, a lot of people, when they don't have that takeaway, again, it's this idea that like, I need to punish myself and not have anything I can enjoy, and they take away everything. And then that's not going to be fun, because when a Friday night is a Friday night, it's got that energy of doing something a little different. And if you're constantly going to like punish yourself on a Friday night and not have the wine or not have the takeaway, you're not going to sustain that, because it's not fun and it's not enjoyable. But just get creative.
Yeah, and I think as well,
This conversation before. Sorry, I had this conversation with a couple of clients before, and this is where it's really similar to what you were saying, Roisin. Is like sometimes people have this belief that in order to get in shape, I have to give up my life, or essentially like I am going to be boring. And it's the same. A lot of us have like these unconscious beliefs, like, for example, rich people are assholes. That's like a belief a lot of people have, you know. And it's like same. I remember having this conversation. Then I was like, as it went on, I'm like, yeah. So this person was say was struggling to get to this next level of physique or shape. And then when we actually kept talking, I was like, so you actually associate getting to that level of shape with basically being boring, not really having a life. So I'm like, you're not going to want to go there because you don't want that. But then it's like, rewriting that story to understand, no, you actually can get to that shape while still having a life. But like you said, you just have to be strategic. There's an approach to take. So I think that's an interesting one as well, because if you perceive certain beliefs around getting to a certain outcome, you're going to nearly sabotage yourself on purpose to get there, you know?
yeah, and I think that's a big point with that as well, as, you know, like you'd often hear people, oh, I can't have that, I'm on a diet, or, you know, they just kind of associate losing weight with being this horrible process that just, there's zero fun involved and it's just like hell, basically. But like, I think anytime I'm dieting, well, besides obviously clients and people doing the photo shoot, you know, they obviously know I'm doing the photo shoot. But I mean, like, we've just been in Perth for the last 2 weeks with Matt's family, and we ate meals with the family every day. We went out, we had froyo, we had treats, we had drinks, we went out for meals, and not one person ever commented on me or Matt and said, oh, like, what are you eating, or why are you eating this? Or no one knew that we were dieting. We were actually in a calorie deficit, but we were still enjoying, you know, the meals out and the food and the going for treats with the kids. But no one like knew any different that we were trying to lose weight. Whereas I think a lot of other people might approach that and be like, oh, I can't have that, I'm on a diet. But you can have it if you just plan it in advance, and it doesn't have to be this big massive
Yeah,
deal,
I think
you
it's
know?
yeah, no, but I think
Does that
it's
make sense?
a lot of it's like a lack of trust in themselves as well, that like they feel like they have to follow someone. They're like, okay, this is how you have to do it, so I have to stick to this. When, and lack of education around it, because you know, the common things is like your calories, movement, or whatever. You take those and then you have full control to like play around to see what your story wants to be. You know, like Matt was saying, you have control to write that narrative. And so you don't have to stick into this box of plain, boring, no fun when you're now dieting and prioritizing your health. And then also, again, a lot of those judgments are coming from yourself, usually. You know, like Eve said, when you're actually out and about, nobody's really picking up on you dieting. Nobody's really noticing. A lot of times we're so invested in ourselves that we forget that, like, it's not about you. Nobody is actually tracking you all the time. Sorry to say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the story we're telling ourselves.
Yeah.
Nobody
A lot
cares
of
about
it.
you.
Okay. Let's not grab that.
I say that to Eve sometimes.
You don't
I
matter.
mean it,
No, I'm kidding.
No,
but in the grand scheme of things, that's it. It's not never as big a
Mhm.
deal as we make it out to be. And even if there is a situation like that with food or whatever,
Yeah.
nobody's going to remember it anyway. You know, it's literally such a small thing in the grand scheme of life. So I think to recap on those, the big thing that is popping out in my mind now is honestly just moving away from the extreme approach to everything. You know, time, thinking you have to have all, you know, commit 20 hours a week to this thing. Weekends, thinking you can't have anything. It has to be this all or nothing kind of approach. And that's the same with the consistency, is just the extreme, knowing that, you know, consistency obviously beats perfection. That's what I always say. But it's not trying to be perfect and just learning and being able to actually adapt. And I think that's the key thing, is knowing if you can continue to improve, you can making time for your health will give you more energy. It will actually improve the quality of your life. And then you can still have a social life with it. You can still enjoy your weekends, enjoy your time off. And then you can, when you have these events, things that come up, it's again, it's normal. And it's like learning how to actually manage them over time. And that way, when you do all this combined, remove it, it creates the lifestyle, you know, because it's not an on or off switch. It's like you try to eat well, exercise all year round, and you make time for your health, you still enjoy your life, and you're able to be consistent. And then you can make these small improvements over time. I nearly lost the camera. So, like, I think if you can do all of them, and a lot of it, if we can change the story that we're telling ourselves about each of these, going to be that's the key. And I think we're all of us here, we have all had different narratives, different stories to why we don't have time, why we can't, you know. So it's creating awareness and understanding that. And a lot of time, those stories, again, it's just our brain trying to keep us safe, because change is hard, change is difficult, it's a bit uncomfortable, you know, when you, and like even on the weekends, what popped, I actually forgot to mention it, it's like, especially with breaking a habit on the weekend, how many times have we done this where it's like the first week where you do it is really hard. And then after that, you're like, oh, I don't really care. Like even when we went off alcohol, first weekend was a bit like, oh, weird. And then like next weekend, we were like, oh yeah, I don't really care for, I could never drink again, you know? But it was just that breaking that cycle is usually the hardest when it comes to anything like that. But once you do, it gets easier. And also when you see the benefit of it, you're able to actually appreciate it. And then you want to do it, and you want it to become part of your life.
Yeah. The three things I was going to say there is, firstly, self-compassion. Just focus on self-compassion. If you are having any, like, if you find yourself beating yourself up, step back and be like, okay, if this was another person, would I treat them the way I'm treating myself? Because you probably wouldn't. Secondly, with events and stuff, again, zooming out and looking at an event and being like, there's so much more to this event than just food and drink. Who am I here with? Who am I socializing with? There's so much more. And again, when you're on a diet and all of that, because food is like so big priority, you can get distracted, but zoom out and see what else this event is bringing. Lastly, an actual exercise, like Matt was saying there, is actually write down what is the story you're telling yourself when it comes to your health and fitness, and write it down. And again, you're getting it out of your head and you're able to look at it from a different perspective, and you're able to be like, why why am I telling myself all of this could be changed and all of this can be worked on? Because yeah, it's the stories we're telling ourselves that stop us from making these changes.
100%. And I think that's a good ending to this week.
Mic drop.
And we do have a question though, which is I like this one. Random question this week. If you had to describe your current life as a movie, which movie would you choose?
Fuck, I can't think of
I know
movies off the
mine.
top of my head.
And Catch Me If You Can. Leonardo DiCaprio.
Catch
You
Me
know that one?
No. Oh damn, I don't know.
The Exorcist.
Jeez, you what?
I love this question, but I can't think of a movie off the top of my head. But my life is like a little movie in my own head.
Yeah.
Movie.
It's like Rose.
Yeah.
Rose.
Yeah,
Rose
there
World.
we go.
Wayne's World, but Rose World. I feel like yours is
The
something.
series
I
of
don't know,
fortunate
centric
events.
in the garden. Lots of yeah.
Lemony
You
Snicket.
loved those books, Eve, didn't you?
Right, guys. Thank you for joining today. Sorry for any glitches in this when it comes out. We had a lot of technical difficulties, but Eve is probably on her third camera now.
And I have no hip
She's
flexors
here.
left. The pain, sitting in this position.
What we do for the pod, huh? What we do for the pod.
That's what you do. It's worth it, you know. Yeah.
And he
Yeah, 5 stars,
You should
please.
at least share the podcast because Eve is gonna have to go to physio now. Right, guys.
Bye.
See you all next week. Thank you for joining.
Bye.
That's a wrap for this episode of the Future Fitness Lifestyle. If you found value in today's conversation, do me a favour. Leave a review, share it with a friend, or tag me on social media. Every share and review allows us to reach more people and bring you even more great content. Stay tuned for weekly episodes packed with insights to help you optimize your health, fitness, and mindset. And if you're ready to take things to the next level and join the MC Future Fitness community, click the link in the description, fill in the application, and let's get started. Thanks for tuning in.